President Falk, Jesus, Marcus, trustees, faculty, fellow alumni, family, and friends, and the esteemed class of 2016. I believe I can speak on behalf of all the recipients of this tremendous honor when I say thank you so much for making us part of this year's convocation and for welcoming us into this inspiring group of Williams alumni. It has been a humbling weekend, and it has been such a joy to be back on campus to see the changes and having several hours yesterday to talk with students and learn about their amazing work. And what has made this experience truly special is that I am able to share it with some of my best friends in the world, who also happen to be my classmates from the great class of 1986, including my classmate and amazing wife, Maureen McDonald. I can't tell all of you how much it means to me, and thank you enough for being here to share this. So seniors, I hope you truly value the friendships that you have, and you work to build them over this final year. The men and women you have come to know since your arrival here and the ones you will spend these glorious last 9 months with are the friends you will have for the rest of your life. They will be there to celebrate your achievements in your personal and professional careers, and that will make those moments sweeter and more memorable. And they will be there when times are tough, when you experience hardship, frustration, and loss. And they will make those times, some of the hardest in your life, more manageable, more peaceful, and even more memorable. I experienced all of those highs and lows with this amazing group of people. And they know well that my path through and from Williams has been a long and winding one, and one that I never imagined would bring me back here today. I, like many, arrived on campus as a pre-med student. That lasted until I took Math 107, or probably more accurately, until it took me. So sophomore year, as I was desperately searching for classes to redirect me on a new career path, classes that didn't end in ology, an upper class friend recommended I take Professor Peter Frost's class on modern Japan. So interestingly, my experience with Professor Frost had started a couple years before this, when as a prospective student, I came across one of his classes. And I am so honored that he and his wife Marnie are here this weekend, back from Ole Miss by way of rural Maine. On that visit, I sat in on his Chinese history class. And during that class, he showed a slide of a charcoal drawing that illustrated a Chinese proverb that says, "Finding the truth with words is like trying to catch a salamander with a spoon." I don't know why, but I thought that was just sort of cool. And I ended up using that as one of my high school yearbook quotes. So I figured it was fate when my friend had suggested I take this class, and I decided to give it a shot. I was sitting in that class one day, which by some cruel twist of karmic fate was held in the chemistry building. Remembering my math experience, the science quad was not filled with happy memories for me. And I was probably lamenting my lost medical career when Professor Frost said something about Buddhism and Christianity being so different that they could never be reconciled. Now, I've never told this story with Professor Frost in the room, and he probably remembers his lecture differently than I do. But the story works better this way, Professor Frost, so I beg your indulgence. So I had been raised a Catholic and had done some reading on Buddhism, which led me to think that actually these two philosophies and faiths had a lot in common. So I decided right then that my term paper was going to be disagreeing with my professor. And I felt that I was finally stepping firmly into this world of liberal arts education. And as I was researching that paper, I came across a book called Zen and Christian, The Journey Between. So I figured, cool, I'm on the right track. And then I realized the author of that book was another Williams professor, John Usden. So in essence, what I thought was going to be my groundbreaking paper had already been written as a book and published by a friend and colleague of the professor I was trying to impress. but I must have been able to come up with something because I ended up doing all right. I took more classes from both professors and ended up being a religion major with a concentration in Asian studies. Sadly, Professor Usden passed away a couple of years ago, but I'm incredibly grateful that I had the opportunity to become friends with these two professors, and even more thankful that they started me on the road to Japan, where I would live and work for 3.5 years, which led me to a career in the hospitality business, which led me to owning and operating my own restaurant, a time that I now refer to as my first experience in the nonprofit sector. And to go back to what I said about friends earlier, many of the investors in that restaurant were friends of mine from Williams College who never saw more than a free beer or a tax write-off, but we still talk to each other and we're good friends. So if any of you out there are planning on going right into the restaurant business, let's have a little chat right after the ceremony. So Professors Frost and Usden encouraged me to do something that at the time was a little unusual and maybe a little risky. And they facilitated that opportunity for me. They encouraged me to find my truth, to catch my salamander. And they and everything that I experienced in and out of the classroom at Williams gave me the confidence to believe that I could do that. So I hope you take this year and get to know your professors. Take them to lunch, have them over for dinner. Make sure you sit on that log that Mark Hopkins talked about and have those conversations with these truly remarkable people. Never, ever again will you be surrounded by a group of brilliant people whose only mission is to make you better and inspire your journey. As confident as I was setting out on my journey to find that perfect career, that dream job, I never for a second considered that I would ultimately find those things in the basement of one of the largest homeless shelters in the country. But that's what happened. I can say with a great deal of certainty that at no time during my 4 beautiful years here, or many years after that, did I ever think that the office I would look forward to going to each morning would be a converted 8x10 cinder block mop closet. But that's what happened. You've heard about the food, the meals that we do at DC Central Kitchen, over 11,000 a day. But we could produce 50, 60, 100,000 meals today. People will still be hungry tomorrow. The reality is, food alone will never end hunger. We will never, ever be able to feed our way out of hunger. What we have to do and what we work hard to do every day is to create opportunities for individuals to break this incredibly destructive and generational cycle of addiction, violence, incarceration, abuse, homelessness, hunger, and ultimately poverty. Using food as a tool, the means, not the end, we do this most powerfully through our culinary job training program, where we train men and women overcoming these hurdles of addiction, incarceration, unemployment, and put them into the hospitality sectors and create paths to lives of self-sufficiency. While we are doing this, below the surface, we are also trying to undo this charity mindset we have in our country, a well-intentioned pursuit that unfortunately seems to have lost its focus, a system that is often more about the redemption of the giver and not the liberation of the receiver. So the kitchen is a place where we focus on that liberation, a place where a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor, a banker, a student, a recovering heroin addict who spent 20 years in prison, and the President of the United States can stand around the same table and work together to make change. A place where we can all come to understand what the Australian Aboriginal leader Lilla Watson meant when she said to missionaries coming to save her people, "If you are here to help me, don't bother. If you are here because your liberation is tied up with mine, let's get to work." Part of that work is breaking down barriers and smashing stereotypes that have held us back for so long and have led to much of the senseless violence and tragedy we see today in our communities across our country. Not only does there seem to be no hope in those communities, there seems to be no understanding of that hopelessness outside of those communities. To bridge that divide the kitchen brings people together around a common table and contextualizes and elevates a dialogue that gives a voice to the voiceless, that includes those that have been marginalized, and offers hope where there is mostly despair and resignation. Ultimately, I believe that is what we are all, each in our own way, tasked to do. But that doesn't mean you have to or should work in the basement of a homeless shelter. Chances are my dream job isn't yours. It might not be writing in a powerful way that captures the minds and hearts of millions like Claudia, or educating and creating structures aimed at increasing economic equality like Kristen, or dedicating yourself to public health and improving the lives of others like Jonathan, or working overseas to ease the pain of those suffering from disease like Hernando. But it's out there. And I'm sure some of you sitting here today have already figured out how you're going to make tomorrow better for others, how you will make our communities more equitable, more inclusive, and more peaceful. Last year, President Falk was speaking to an alumni group in Washington, D.C. And after he finished telling us all how remarkable the class of 2016 was, especially Jack Bissell, he said, "At Williams, we want students who wake up every day and want to change the world." Simple enough. I bet they never say that at Amherst. So that's your perfunctory Amherst slam for this. I don't know that I ever said that to myself back then. Probably just another reason I wouldn't get into Williams today. But I do know that Williams gave me the confidence and the intellectual curiosity to keep searching until I got to that place where I would say that. That place turned out to be DC Central Kitchen. And with deference to Lou Gehrig, I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I get to see that change happening every day in the lives of our students, in the lives of the men and women who have graduated from our program and are now my colleagues. One of those colleagues is Dwayne Arrington. Dwayne grew up in Southeast DC, the most economically marginalized and impoverished area of our nation's capital, just a couple miles from incredible wealth and prosperity. Dwayne came to the kitchen as a student in our training program not long after I began. And Dwayne told me that when he was 10, he said to himself, and this was a big, big if I'm alive when I'm 21, I'm going to be in prison. He didn't say this out of self-pity or resignation, but out of a recognition of the reality of his environment. And when Dwayne was 11, he was arrested for the first time stealing food to feed him and his brothers. His father was a dealer who was in jail. His mother was an addict who would leave him and his brothers for weeks at a time in apartments with no water, no electricity. And they would roam around town trying to find a place to stay. And that arrest at age 11 started a very predictable cycle of gangs and violence and incarceration that would last 23 years. So think to yourself for a moment what you've done between the time you were 11 till today, and what you hope and will do for the next 12 years of your life. And think that Dwayne, with a couple months here, a couple months there, spent that entire time in a 6x8 cell with one or two other guys. When he went in for his last sentence, a 35-year sentence, he said to himself, I've got to change. And he did what we, society, tell the Dwaynes of the world to do. He got his GED. He got trade certificates, thinking that if he ever got out, he could get a job and try again. And he did, after 13 years, get out. And he did try. And for 2 months, he went knocking on doors to get that job and got nothing but rejection. He went back to his caseworker and he said, look, you might as well put me back in jail now. Can't get a job, and I know where this is heading, and it's going to get me hurt or worse or back in jail. She sent him down to DC Central Kitchen. He was a tough case. Chip on his shoulder the size of a Buick. He actually left after a couple of days, but we chased him down and he became a model student. And when he graduated, we hired him into our catering company. But he quickly asked to be transferred to the main kitchen so he could work with the men and women who were overcoming hurdles like he did, so he could help them find what he had found. He's been promoted several times. He's now the manager of our main kitchen that produces 5,000 meals a day to make our community a better place. He has things that he never imagined: a job, insurance, a retirement plan, but most importantly, a family. And he has a 4-year-old daughter. And when that daughter is 10 years old, and don't think for a minute this is different because she's a girl. We have many, many women coming to our programs out of incarceration. But when Dwayne's daughter is 10, she will not say to herself, if I'm alive when I'm 21, I'm going to be in prison. Because Dwayne won't let that happen. And the cycle has been broken. And think for a moment the countless lives that will be affected in a positive way because of that. That is the truth that I have found. That is the salamander that I was finally able to catch. And I hope that all of you take this amazing gift that is Williams on your journey, and do not stop until you find your truth, until you catch your salamander. Thank you very much for letting us be part of this. Enjoy the journey.